Welcome to another episode of the Complete Performance Exercise Breakdown video series, where I take different exercises that you're using in the gym or at home and break them down to show you how to do it, where you should be feeling these muscles, and how to apply it into your training. So today's exercise is one of those that you might look at somebody else in the gym and wonder, what in the heck are you doing? It's the upright hip thrust. But this is an exercise that if you have knee or back pain, this is one that you need to incorporate into your training program. It's a great exercise for building the glutes, for targeting the hamstrings, and even eliminating the hamstrings if they are overly dominant, and for building that back strength. So let's get into the technique of the upright hip thrust. Now there are a couple different variations. I'm going to show you the standing version. There is also a kneeling version, which works great as well and is one that I use often with clients. But first things first, depending on your location, if you're at a gym where you have a band that you need to loop around the base of a squat rack like this, you're going to step into the band. If you're in a big box gym that has cable machines, you might loop the rope attachment or the handle attachment onto the cable, pull it down to the bottom, and hold it between your legs. Neither is wrong. They're both targeting the same muscles. The setup is just a little bit different. So in order to get in, I'm going to grab onto the band. I'm going to step into the band and bring it up to my hips here. I'm going to place it right across my hip bones. I'm going to stand with my feet roughly shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit narrower depending on space. But here's the thing, when you set up, you do need to make sure that you sit into your legs slightly because of the way the band is pulling you back. You may want to have this tendency to pull back into your heels, which could cause you to tip backwards. So make sure you give yourself a good strong base. I'm going to try and make a tripod with my feet and grab the floor with my toes as well as my heels. And from here, I'm going to push my hips back to hinge at my hips, and then I'm going to drive through my heels to pull my hips through. Now, when I do that, some common mistakes that I might see are, first and foremost, a lot of people want to push the knees out first. This is a hip dominant movement, so we want to keep this a hinge at the hips. So really focus on bending at the hips first, and the knees might casually bend to associate, to kind of support that motion. But what we don't want is for the knees to go first and the hips to go down to the floor. We want this to be like a hip thrust, like a glute bridge, like a good morning almost, where we push those hips back and we're in that position where the chest is parallel to the floor, feet are solidly planted, and then we can drive back through. Second most common mistake that I see comes in the chest positioning. I see one of two things. I see really hyperextended upper back to keep the eyes forward, and by doing that, that places a lot of stress on the low back. The second mistake that I see is really big rounding forward in that back. And arms may even be here. You've got this really big thoracic arch all the way down, extending into that lumbar spine, and giving me some really big rounding here. Now, it might not feel bad. It might even give you a little bit of a stretch in the back initially, but if you continue to add weight, you continue to add resistance to this exercise, even volume, just repetitions and sets to this, it's really going to create some wear and tear in that mid to low back. So I always tell clients to pull the shoulder blades together, lock something into your armpits as if you're holding a book, bags, your phone, something that you don't want to drop onto the floor, and from here you're going to allow your eyes to follow you. I like to think that my eyes start forward and trace down. Others, it works really well to tell them to envision a point 6 feet in front of them and keep their eyes on that point as they tip at the hips. Last most common mistake I see comes in the return to that stand position. Because of the way that the weight is pulling you, we typically have the tendency to want to do too much and to really push those hips through. That's the extension at the back that can be really harmful to you, one that I really would like you to avoid. I want you to think of this as you're just going back to standing. Think that you're squeezing your cheeks closed, and that motion should really be it. If you get back to this top position and you feel like you're then looking up to the ceiling or up at the corner to where the ceiling meets the wall, you've probably arched your back a little bit too far. A great way to correct this and to notice this is to put your hand kind of on just at the top of the hips and on the low back to come here, and then once you return to that standing position, you can check to see if we went too far hyperextended. So there are some demonstrations of the upright hip thrust. Many of those mistakes relate to the kneeling down version as well, the cable pull-through version. But they're great options for you to use and have in your training. But where do they go? Well, typically I like to use these as a warm-up exercise or an accessory exercise, potentially even a burnout. They're not an exercise that I want to do for metric-based training. I'm not too concerned about how much you can upright hip thrust, what's the greatest resistance you use. It's an exercise that I like to use to warm up the glutes and warm up the hamstrings, warm up that hip extension version. And then it's an exercise that I like to use as an accessory because it is a great glute builder. It's one that if we add as an accessory exercise or even in a burnout set where we can really get some high repetitions in there, we can really add some volume to the glutes. Thanks for checking out another episode of the Complete Performance Exercise Breakdown video series. Zoe decided to help out in this video. Stay tuned for more episodes from both myself, maybe from Zoe. And if you have any requests, feel free to drop those in and we'll make sure to make a video just for you. Good girl.